They told you to rise above it. They told you that insults don't matter unless you let them, that if you're strong enough, you'll just ignore it. Let it pass. Don't react. Be the bigger person. That's the lie. A socially acceptable, polished, and poisonous lie. Because you don't ignore an insult. You feel it, you replay it, you analyze it, and somewhere deep in your body, your status changes. Someone just challenged your position, and you did nothing. Let's break it open. An insult is not just words. It's a weapon. It's a public, psychological move meant to reposition you beneath someone else. Not always loud, not always obvious, but always strategic. Every insult, direct or disguised, has a purpose to dominate the social space, to trigger your reaction, to place you in a defensive frame. When someone insults you, they are claiming control of the emotional narrative. The insult could be subtle. You look tired today. Or social. He's always trying so hard. Or disguised as advice, you should smile more. It's all the same. It's not meant to help you. It's meant to reposition you. And most men take the bait. They laugh awkwardly. They defend themselves. They over-explain. They insult back. Or worst of all, they stay silent but tense, pretending they're unbothered while burning inside. All of it is weakness. Let's say it clearly. The moment you care about being insulted, you've already lost. But the solution is not ignoring it. That's the trap. Because ignoring an insult without internal strategy doesn't make you powerful. It makes you hollow. You cannot simply erase the emotional blow of an insult by pretending it doesn't exist. That's how people become passive, cold, and invisible. So, what's the truth? You must not ignore the insult. You must neutralize it, and that requires understanding power dynamics. Niccolo Machiavelli wrote, "Men should either be caressed or destroyed." Why? Because anything in between invites retaliation. Insults, by nature, fall into that in-between. They're not enough to start a war, but they're just enough to damage your perception. Machiavelli understood perception is power, and that's what insults attack. Not your feelings, but your position, your aura, your frame. This is why the court of Louis XIV was obsessed with manners. Why Roman senators wore togas of a specific length. Why kings executed jester satirists when they went too far. Insults disturb the symbolic hierarchy. And in every room, there is one, even if it's unspoken. So you, the modern man, must stop playing by the emotional rules of weak people. You must stop thinking, if I stay calm, I win. No, if you stay calm without asserting psychological control, you disappear. There's a reason she keeps making little comments about your masculinity. There's a reason your colleague keeps joking about your work ethic. They're testing how you define yourself. They want to know, will you react emotionally? You lose? Will you ignore it and shrink? You lose. Will you laugh to fit in? You lose. Or will you twist the frame without breaking composure? Now we're getting closer. Here's the truth Machiavelli would want you to see. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. Why? Because fear creates silence, and silence gives you control. If you're insulted, and the room waits to see how you'll respond, you are being tested, not just for strength, but for strategy. And this is where most men fail. They either become too reactive or too neutral. You must be cold, but tactically aware. You must learn the 3 categories of insult: low-level mockery, designed to provoke minor reactions; public dismissal, aimed at reshaping social perception; hidden dagger, subtle, psychological attack masked as kindness or concern. And for each, there's a different method of handling. But the rule is always this: never react with emotion. Never explain yourself. Never show visible offense. Instead, you pivot. You don't play defense. You don't try to disprove them. You flip the structure of the interaction entirely. Let's end this part with a real-world truth. If someone insults you in public, they've chosen the stage. Now, the audience is watching. You don't win by pleasing the crowd. You win by freezing the room. Not through volume, not through anger, but through a psychological shift so calm, so surgical, it leaves them unsure if you've just attacked or simply erased them. That's how power moves. That's what makes you untouchable. And from this moment on, you no longer believe the lie that being silent is being strong. Because Machiavellian silence is never passive. It's a trap, and you're learning how to set it. You don't defend your name. You don't justify your intentions. You don't explain what they meant. You dominate the frame, or you exit it untouched. This is the first rule. An insult is not about the insult. It's about the frame of reality it tries to place you in. If they say he probably didn't get the promotion because he's too soft-spoken, what they're doing isn't casual. They're framing you as unfit for leadership without having to take responsibility for saying it outright. Now, if you defend yourself, you've already accepted their frame. If you stay silent, you've accepted it too. The only path forward is redirection of narrative power. And here's how it works. There are only 3 ways to respond with power when insulted: reframe, reverse, remove. Let's break each one down with Machiavellian precision. 1. Reframe, shift the definition. This is when you don't fight the insult. You redefine what it means in your favor. Example. She says, "You're too serious. You should relax more." The weak man replies, "I'm not always serious." The Machiavellian man responds, "Serious men build empires. Playful men become jesters." Same words, different outcome. You've reframed the insult into a symbol of power. You didn't deny it. You didn't apologize. You elevated it into superiority. This disarms her, and more importantly, it confuses the audience. That's how you win. 2. Reverse psychological judo. Instead of absorbing the attack, you throw it back not with force, but with leverage. This is when you twist the insult into a question or a counter-observation that puts them on display. They say, "You're not very talkative, are you?" The average man stammers. "I guess I just don't know what to say sometimes." You respond. "Some people speak to be seen. I speak to shift things. Which one are you?" Now you've reversed the spotlight. You've made them the subject, and you've implied that silence is power, not awkwardness. This is not aggression. This is surgical dominance. It's the kind of move that makes a whole room pause. 3. Remove cold detachment. Sometimes, a direct response is too generous, especially when the insult comes from someone below your level. In those moments, silence is not retreat. It's erasure. They throw a dig. You stare. You blink. You tilt your head slightly, and you say nothing. But what matters is how you say nothing. Not with shame, not with flinching, with indifference. Because Machiavelli understood contempt is the most effective weapon when used by the superior. Your silence says you are not worth acknowledgement. That's more devastating than any verbal retaliation, especially in front of others. Now let's apply this to real-life social warfare. Imagine you're in a meeting. You make a suggestion. Your colleague says, with a smirk, "Bold idea, a bit risky, don't you think?" He's not asking a question. He's inviting the room to question your competence. The weak man defends, "I've run the numbers. I think it's sound." The Machiavellian man reframes. Boldness is the only edge left in a cautious industry. Playing safe is how people stay replaceable. Now the energy shifts. You've changed the battlefield. And the real genius, you didn't get angry. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't even acknowledge the insult directly. You converted the moment into authority. This is how psychological power is built. Not by being louder, but by being sharper. Let's go deeper. What happens internally when someone insults you? Most men collapse because they were trained to seek approval. They want to be liked, to be seen as easygoing, to avoid confrontation. But here's the Machiavellian correction. You don't need approval. You need control. Approval makes you soft. Control makes you strategic. Once you detach from the need to be seen as nice, insults lose all sting, because the insult is only painful if you fear what people think. Machiavelli wrote, "A prince must learn how not to be good, not evil, just not good, not obsessed with virtue, not crippled by conscience." The moment you can hold your center without needing to be perceived as kind, smart, funny, moral, or likable, you become unbreakable, not emotionless, but emotionally untouchable. And that's when the game flips. Every social group has an unspoken hierarchy. Insults are the currency used to test and recalibrate that order. People use jokes, sarcasm, tone, and timing to probe. Who here is dominant? Who reacts? Who explains themselves? Who needs to be seen? The one who does not explain. The one who twists the narrative without needing to raise his voice. The one who either reframes, reverses, or removes with surgical coldness. That man wins. Not instantly, but inevitably, because the room remembers. And that's what Machiavelli understood. Men judge more by the eye than by the hand. They remember how you made them feel, how you made others look, how you didn't flinch. That's legacy. And that's how you deal with insults. Not with rage, not with fake indifference, but with strategic, ruthless poise. You've been insulted before not because you were weak, but because someone thought they could get away with it. That's the psychology most men never see. Insults are never about truth. They are about leverage. A person insults you only when they believe you care what others think. You won't retaliate, or your current position is threatening theirs. Let's make it clear, you don't get insulted when you're irrelevant. You get insulted when someone sees you as competition. It could be status, attention, power, or even just quiet presence. Whatever it is, your existence unsettles them and their weapon is ridicule. But that's not the interesting part. The real danger comes from how you interpret it. Because when you take insults personally, you reveal exactly where your weakness is. She says, "Oh, you're not one of those guys who gets jealous, are you?" And you reply, "Of course not. I'm very secure. You just exposed your need to appear secure. You've walked into the trap." Or a coworker says, "You've been awfully quiet lately. Everything okay?" And you say, "Yeah, just focused." You've now signaled self-consciousness. He probed your silence, and you validated his frame. Understand this, most insults are questions in disguise. They are indirect requests for one thing, your emotional data, and weak men give it away instantly. Let's say it like a strategist. Every insult is an offer, and you don't have to accept it. If someone throws you a poisoned chalice, you don't drink from it just to prove you're not afraid. You let it sit on the table. You nod. You smile. You speak about something else. You redirect. Now they are the one left uncertain. This is power. This is what it means to stop living reactively. Here's the core problem. Most men try to earn respect by showing virtue, but Machiavelli knew the appearance of virtue is more useful than virtue itself. Why? Because when you lead with sincerity, you give people access to your soul. You give them too much to target. You become vulnerable to every attack against your identity. Let me explain. If you build your self-image around being smart, funny, emotionally supportive, a good guy, then the moment someone questions that image, you spiral. They say you're overthinking it again, and you immediately jump to defend your intelligence. They say you're always trying to be the nice guy, and suddenly you're justifying your kindness. You don't even realize it, but they've taken the wheel. Here's how to escape that trap. Detach your identity from validation. You are not your reputation. You are not your impression. You are your frame. And once your frame is strong, insults bounce off, not because you're numb, but because you've built psychological armor. This armor is made of three things: ambiguity, composure, control of narrative. Let's break them down. 1. Ambiguity. You stop being predictable. The more emotionally readable you are, the more leverage others have over you. So the Machiavellian man learns to create confusion, not chaos confusion. He doesn't over-explain. He doesn't react instantly. He lets his silence stretch, and in that space people project. They wonder, did he take offense? Is he planning something? Did I go too far? And now they are psychologically off balance. You didn't attack. You didn't retaliate. You simply allowed uncertainty to grow. And that is terrifying. 2. Composure. You own your reactions. You don't perform your emotions. You don't perform stoicism either. You sit in the center of the insult like it's meaningless static. This tells the room this man doesn't need to defend himself, because he already owns himself. True composure is not fake neutrality. It's unshakable self-ownership. It's the look in your eyes that says, I know who I am, and I don't flinch. That's what earns silent respect, not volume, not charisma, but immovability. 3. Control of narrative. You decide what matters. Machiavelli would call this stage management. Who sets the tone? Who sets the topic? Who chooses the direction? That person owns the room. And insults are just attempts to shift that direction. If you allow them to succeed, you follow. But if you redirect, you lead. You must never forget, the man who controls the meaning of things controls the crowd. Not by force, by frame, by subtly changing what the insult means in the context of the conversation, by refusing to answer questions on their terms, by elevating the discussion beyond the insult without appearing defensive. That's not passive, that's not weakness, that's frame control. And frame control is the unseen throne in every interaction. Let's tie this back to real life. Every group of friends has a target. Every workplace has an outsider. Every relationship has power imbalances, and in each language becomes a weapon. If you are the man who constantly clarifies himself, laughs nervously, tries to be understood, takes jokes personally, looks to others for cues, then you will always be the one insulted, and never the one feared. But if you learn to respond without reacting, twist frames without force, let others squirm in the silence you leave behind, then slowly, people stop challenging you, because challenging you no longer gives them power, it only exposes them. Machiavelli never taught men to be violent. He taught men to be calculating, because when you react emotionally, you become predictable, and when you're predictable, you're controllable. But if you carry yourself with controlled ambiguity, if your face reveals nothing, if your responses are calculated and cold, then the world has to think twice before aiming their words at you. They won't know what will come back, and that's the beginning of real protection. You've learned how to respond to insults, but there's a deeper layer. It's not about handling one person. It's about controlling the entire environment that allows insults to thrive. Because here's what most men never realize. You're not being insulted because of what you did. You're being insulted because of how the room sees you. Let's break this down. Every social group, whether friends, workplace, family, or public interaction, has an invisible power map. Who speaks with confidence, who gets interrupted, whose jokes land, whose silence matters. That's the real structure, not the one written in titles or job roles. And within that structure, insults are calibration tools. People insult to test if you're rising, put you back in place, signal superiority to others, generate laughs to increase their own value. You think the insult is about you. It's not. It's about what they gain in the ecosystem by diminishing you. This is why random people online insult strangers, why colleagues undermine others in meetings, why insecure friends make jokes that aren't jokes. Because every social system runs on status dynamics, and insults are the subtle rituals used to maintain that order. So if you want to rise, you don't just deal with the insult, you deal with the ecosystem that rewards it. This is how powerful men move. They don't react to individuals. They alter the environment so that certain behavior becomes unacceptable without ever being addressed directly. Let's walk through this. Example 1. The funny friend who targets you. He always makes jokes at your expense. Everyone laughs. You laugh too because you don't want to ruin the vibe. But each joke lowers your value. Each laugh shifts your role. Now you're the one we tease. You've become a social cushion, a role no one respects. Solution. Don't call him out emotionally. Don't beg for respect. Instead, when he throws the next jab, don't laugh. Let a pause settle in the room. Turn slightly, tilt your head, and say one line flat, slow, cold. You still doing that thing where you talk for attention, or is that supposed to be clever? Then go silent. Look away. Let the room adjust. You didn't explode. You didn't explain. You disrupted the pattern, and from that moment the group starts recalibrating. Your frame shifted. Example 2. The passive-aggressive colleague. You're in a team setting. He says, "Let's just hope we don't miss the deadline this time." Right, it's a dig. He's not addressing you directly, but everyone knows who it's aimed at. This is what Machiavelli would call public whispering, the art of throwing a dagger without getting blamed. So, how do you respond? Not emotionally, not with protest. You wait for the moment of tension to settle. You smile slightly, then say, "Some people talk. Some people deliver." Pause. Eye contact. No tone change. Then turn to the task and move forward like nothing happened. That one sentence did 3 things. Reclaimed the frame, implied competence without bragging, humiliated the attacker without ever naming him, and most importantly, you let the insult expose them instead of defending yourself. This is how you turn rooms in your favor, by mastering status tension. Because every room has a current of energy. Most men are reactive particles within that current. You are now learning to shape it. Let's go further. There's a second rule in insult dynamics that's rarely spoken. Insults only land when you're emotionally accessible. When people sense that you need something from them, approval, inclusion, understanding, they know exactly where to place the dagger. You laugh too loud. You apologize too fast. You explain too much. You carry anxiety in your shoulders, and they smell it. But when your presence says, "I need nothing from you," you become insulated. Your self-respect becomes a quiet shield. You don't chase belonging. You don't perform social dances. You just exist with control and watch the room adjust. This is the Machiavellian model. He who stands still while others move becomes the point they orbit. Here's the third layer. Once you've mastered frame control, you don't just survive insults. You start to use them subtly, strategically, quietly, not to destroy others, but to define the hierarchy. Let's call this surgical mockery. It looks like a joke. It sounds like nothing, but it places you above and them beneath with surgical precision. Example. Someone interrupts you mid-sentence. You pause, look at them, then calmly say, "Go ahead. I can wait for logic to catch up." Then sip your drink. It's elegant. It's cutting. And it makes the entire room reassign the status level of both people. That's not meanness, that's silent dominance. Machiavelli said injuries should be inflicted all at once, so that their ill savor is less. But he also implied the art is in making it look like you didn't inflict anything at all. Because when you retaliate without being seen as aggressive, you win both the battle and the perception. You don't destroy people. You leave them confused about whether they were just destroyed. That's when they stop testing you. Insults don't end by becoming untouchable. They end by becoming unchallengeable. And that's the point no one talks about. You don't need people to like you. You don't need to be the center of attention. You don't need to fight every disrespect. You simply need to shift the rules of the room until no one dares play them against you. That's control. And that's where we're going. By now, you see it. Insults were never about emotions. They were power signals, tests, probes, ritualized warfare disguised as humor, critique, or just being honest. And you've spent years walking into it, thinking if you were just kind enough, smart enough, calm enough, it would stop. But it never stops, because insults don't target your behavior. They target your energy. When you radiate availability, softness, openness, you invite targeting. When you broadcast neediness, even subtly, you mark yourself. So here's the final truth. You don't get insulted when you're powerful. You get insulted when you're reachable. And power isn't noise, it's distance. It's the ability to exist in a room without being accessible. Let's break it down. The psychology of distance. Think about the people you hesitate to tease. Not because they're aggressive, not because they'll explode, but because you can't quite read them. You can't predict how they'll respond. That mystery, that unreadable stillness, it makes people cautious. And that is your final weapon, strategic emotional distance. It's not coldness, it's not aloofness. It's a controlled reduction in visibility. You no longer explain yourself. You don't reveal your thoughts freely. You don't laugh automatically at every joke. You don't mirror other people's energy. You slowly remove access to your emotional center until the people around you start second-guessing everything they say to you. And in that vacuum of certainty, you grow in power. Let's make it even clearer. How do you become untouchable? You stop offering the 4 things that make you a target validation. You no longer give away approval to win comfort. Clarity. You stop giving people clear emotional readings. Justification. You stop explaining your actions or presence. Predictability. You stop responding in the way they expect. Each one of these is a thread. When they pull it, they get access to your identity. You cut the threads, one by one, and eventually they stop reaching because they realize you cannot be moved. Let's go back to Machiavelli. The prince must learn how to be loved and feared, but never despised. Why? Because fear without resentment creates stability, and resentment only grows when people feel you're competing with them on their level. So what does the Machiavellian man do? He rises without declaring war. He silences without confronting. He eliminates disrespect without drama. He makes himself quietly ineligible for insult not by being a threat, but by being too difficult to engage. Picture this. You walk into a room. You speak less. You smile less. You don't nod just to keep peace. You move slower. You observe longer. You speak only when the silence is heavier than your voice. When someone jokes at you, you don't laugh. You don't glare. You don't explain. You just look at them with surgical boredom like they were trying to perform and failed. And then you continue as if they never existed. Not once, not twice, every time. Until one day they stop trying. Because you've taught the environment, insulting this man creates no gain. It creates discomfort. It creates unease. It brings no attention, no validation, no performance. And now the room reorients around you. You never raised your voice. You never struck back. You just made interaction feel risky. That's Machiavellian. Let's go even deeper. The highest form of power is not control over others. It's control over reaction. Because once you can be insulted and your pulse doesn't change, once you can be challenged and you answer with stillness, once you can be misunderstood and you don't lift a finger to explain, you're no longer in the game. You are above it. People insult when they think you're in the ring with them. When you make it clear silently, persistently that you're elsewhere, the fight dies before it starts. And that's the final shift. You've tried being the kind one, the reasonable one, the strong but silent one, the humorous one. None of them protect you from disrespect, because all of them share one flaw. They make you available. And in a world of emotional warfare, availability is weakness. So here is where you exit that system. From now on, you don't correct people. You don't soften blows. You don't clarify intentions. You don't accept poisoned gifts masked as humor. You don't reward attacks with any form of acknowledgement. You exist behind a layer of unreadable steel. Not aggressive, not fake. Just so solid no one knows what you're really thinking. That's what makes people pull back. That's what turns attempts into hesitation. That's what makes a man insult-proof. And the final piece, you say less. You do less. You show less. Because the more you speak, the more target surface you offer, the more you reveal, the more control you surrender, the more you perform, the more permission you give others to critique. But when you master the art of controlled presence, you don't need to silence people. They silence themselves. You don't need to gain respect. They recalibrate naturally around you. You don't need to win the game. You walk away and the board collapses behind you. That is the end game, and it begins now.